we have a crisis in public education in America today. And it's the worst kind of crisis because it doesn't affect all of us in the same way. If you think about global terrorism, we're all in that together. But in education, the zip code you live in, your parents' income, when they first came to America, are often outcome determinative. And if you see those NAEP scores I showed you, 20 years after a nation at risk, we are a nation at even greater risk. And if you see those international scores, think about what that's going to mean for our lowest performing kids when countries throughout the world are improving their educational systems, competing against us in a much more aggressive way. And those concerns apply here in Connecticut as well. Connecticut is a relatively affluent state, and yet what you see is massive achievement gaps between its poorest and its wealthiest kids. Indeed, this state's challenge should be a lot easier than many states. And yet, if you look over the last several years on the national tests, that massive achievement gap you have is actually growing over time. Indeed, growing faster than other states. So I hope we share a common view that we need to be concerned about this, not in a kind of go slow, incremental way, but that it is time to think differently. The second takeaway is it doesn't have to be this way. I've been doing this job for 6.5 years. I can tell you, indeed I can show you, the very same kids that we are not educating well in a different school with different teachers, different leadership, different values, different cultures, you get entirely different results. You have any doubt about that? Go to Amistad Academy, run by Daisha Toll, who's sitting up here, and see what's happening with those kids at that school. You have any doubt about that? Come to Bronx Lab. Somebody from ISA who was here today talked about their graduation. Bronx Lab is one of my high schools in New York City. It was in a building where my mother had gone to high school some 70 years ago. And that building, we had a school called the Vanderchild that had 30% graduation rates. We replaced that with 5 small schools. One of those was Bronx Lab. Bronx Lab is 98% African American, Latino, almost all poverty. Nobody had, virtually no one's parents had gone to college. Bronx Lab, first graduation last year, was well over 90% graduates. Almost 3 times. And let me give you another statistic, one that I submit to you is very powerful. New York State, like Connecticut, is a state that's predominantly white, predominantly affluent in terms of Title I. Last year on our tests, what we did in New York, and I'll talk about this, we've opened up a lot of charter schools. Indeed, one of the things we were smart enough to do is recruit Daisha Toll and Achievement First down there. But New York State, in its tests last year, our charters basically outperformed the state of New York. Our charters are more than twice in terms of its percentage African American and Latino. And our charters are twice in terms of poverty rates of the state. So here's a school group, lots of people, we're talking about thousands of kids, who are much, much more from high poverty minority communities, slightly outperforming the entire state of New York. So don't believe when people tell you it cannot be done. From the day I took this job, friends of mine, people I respect, have looked me in the eye and said, Chancellor, you will never fix education in America until you fix poverty. And you know what, folks? Those people got it exactly backwards. We will never fix poverty in America until we fix education. If you have any doubt about what I've just said, as I say, I'm happy to show you the schools with the same kids. And people say, well, they were creamed or they were selected this way or that way. But I know where they started. I know what their 5th grade scores were and before they went to a different school and what their 6th grade scores. I know from parent satisfaction surveys, and I know from talking to kids. Let me tell you, a kid reads adults, even if he doesn't read books. He reads adults well. and he knows exactly what the expectations are. And I want to share a little story because it's powerful to me. I walked into one of my schools in Brooklyn. It's an all-boys school in Bedford-Stuyvesant. It's almost 100% African-American boys. That is in many ways one of our most challenging cohorts in terms of educational outcomes. I walked in, a young kid stops me, didn't know, didn't expect me to be there. He said, "Good morning, Chancellor." So I said, I was a little surprised because nobody knows what a chancellor is. It's not like being a mayor, where everyone knows you are. So I said, "Good morning, young man." I said, "What's your name?" He says, "Jamal." I said, "What grade are you?" He says, "I'm in kindergarten." I said, "Jamal, what do you do here at Excellence Academy?" He says, "Well, I'm in the University of Pennsylvania program." So, that's right. I had the exact same attitude. I looked at it. I said, "Jamal," I said, "what are you talking about?" I said, "You're in kindergarten. What do you mean you're in the University of Pennsylvania program?" You know what he says to me? He said, "Well, Chancellor," he says, "I'm on my way to college. It's never too young to think about it," right? And now, that is a kid whose expectations have been reset from the environment that he knew. And by the time he's in 3rd or 4th grade, I guarantee he will have been to the University of Pennsylvania. You have any doubt about it? A recent book just came out by a fellow named David Whitman, a former reporter for U.S. News and World Report, called "Sweating the Small Stuff," that shows how we can get entirely different, indeed superior outcomes. It won't be easy. And that's the third and final point I want to make and develop today. It's not going to happen if we continue to have the same old approach to education. What do I mean by the same old, same old? We've had this discussion at least since The Nation at Risk, probably since Brown versus Board of Education, right? We talk about how much do we spend. We talk about class size. We talk about curriculum. We talk about all of the programs. And those things are important. But if that's all we talk about, we will not change the outcomes in a dramatic and significant way. And that's what the point of this discussion is today. This is going to take bold change, not small incremental change, and it's going to take a sense of urgency. And how you get urgency in a community is one of the challenges that I have faced since the day I began, because many people, no matter what the overall state, many people are happy with their kids' current education. And the real crisis is an underclass crisis that we have to mobilize as a people together to address. It's not just a moral imperative. Increasingly, because of those numbers, it's going to become an economic imperative.